All right, we are ready to jump into today's lesson. Welcome to day 3 of the law of intuition. And we've been looking at the biblical character of Jethro. Now, when you're reading in scripture, you have to be careful, or else you can overlook his story because it's confined to one chapter in the book of Exodus. So look carefully. It's in chapter 18 that has Jethro's story. And what a wonderful story it is, and in particular, as it relates to the subject, generally speaking, of leadership, and then in particular, as he is a model of what we are calling the law of intuition. And again, by way of review, the law of intuition says that intuitive leaders can sense what's happening among people and almost instantly know their hopes, their fears, and their concerns. And I just throw out anecdotally, what a great leader to be under or to be with is someone that has that sense of knowing what is important to you. And what a great aspiration that is for those of us who are leaders in regard to those that we lead, that the people we lead would have that sense too, that we have that kind of sense, that understanding of their hopes and fears and concerns. So today, our leadership thought for the day is focused on this issue, that a leader's intuition can add value to others. Again, a leader's intuition can add value to others. So let's unpack this today and jump in by way of introduction. So we're going to talk just a little bit in a more general sense as we lead into our subject today on the gift of leadership. And John Maxwell writes in the 21 Most Powerful Minutes in a Leader's Day on page 125, because leaders see the world with a leadership bias, they are capable of making an immediate impact on their people and organizations. And that makes it possible for them to add value to others' lives. When Jethro stepped into Moses' life and helped him improve his leadership, his efforts made a huge difference, not only for Moses, but also for all the children of Israel. He told Moses, if you do this thing, and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all this people will also go to their place in peace. So in other words, we have what we might call a win-win, that Moses would be able to endure and that the people would have their needs met, that they would go home in peace. And that is the product of the idea, the proposal that Jethro had as we jumped into that story, and now you're pretty familiar with it. But that's the essence of leadership then, is to add value to people's lives. And certainly Jethro did that for Moses, because Moses, even though he probably didn't realize it at the time, most people don't who are facing burnout, because it's not something that happens instantly, but something we kind of gradually walk into, and one day we realize, we wake up, oh my gosh, I can't do this another day. But oftentimes we don't know about that until it hits. And so Jethro stepped into Moses' life at such a strategic time. Good things were happening, to be sure. They had just been set free, but that freedom also created responsibilities and challenges. And so Jethro came in at just the right time and had this proposal for Moses, and Moses wisely took that advice. And so as we dive a little deeper then into our subject today, I want to share some points about what intuitive leaders provide that others can't. Now, we spoke yesterday and kind of shared a definition of what intuition is all about. It's that sense of knowing without having studied or prepared or done scientific research, that you just have a sense within you that you just know this as if it was scripted for you. So that's what we mean by intuition. And so there are 5 things that we want to discuss today in our time together that intuitive leaders provide that others can't. Number 1 is that they see differently. Now, we're not talking about Red Lobster. That's seafood. No, they just see differently. They provide correction. Number 2, they see globally. And by that, I mean that they provide direction. Third, they see clearly, which means that they provide structure. Fourth, they see relationally, which means that they provide support. And then 5, they see expectantly. And I love that word, which means they provide confidence. So let's look at each one of these for a few moments. Many people, talking about seeing differently, many people can identify a problem. We all know those people out there who are very good at identifying problems, but when it comes to offering a solution, little different story. For example, Moses, he understood the problem of the people. When they couldn't resolve a dispute on their own, what do? They all came to Moses to have that resolution resolved, to have the dispute resolved. And so it's one thing, as I just said, to identify a problem, but how much better if you also offer a solution? And how smart we are as leaders if we train people to not only identify problems, but also to identify at least potential solutions. Just thought I'd throw that in at no extra charge. Secondly here, how did Jethro see the situation differently than Moses? Of all of these people coming to him, Jethro looked at it through a different prism than Moses did, because Moses was really clued into the human need, but Jethro saw it as a leadership issue instead. And so the leadership need then in this situation was that Moses was doing everything all by himself. Can you imagine if you were at the back of that line, having been there all day long? For one, you're thinking that, wow, did Moses get a lunch break? Did he go to the cafeteria and get something to eat? I don't know. Probably not. So I wonder if you were at the back of the line, not only were you probably pretty hot, because remember they were in a desert, but where was Moses? Someone who's been doing this all day long, you'd wonder about the quality of their decisions if you were kind of at the end of the line, just by sheer exhaustion. And so Moses had a problem, which apparently he didn't realize that it was such a problem. So Jethro then helped Moses see the problem for what it really was, not what it appeared to be. That's what intuitive leaders can provide for us. So moving on then, they see globally, talking about intuitive leaders, which means they provide direction. As we discussed yesterday, Jethro could see that Moses was heading for trouble if he insisted on doing everything himself. Now, this is a really hard and challenging situation when things seem to be going well right now, but it's heading down a path of trouble, but we don't see the trouble because it's so easy to identify and put all of our eggs in the basket that says, hey, we haven't gotten into trouble yet, so why should we change? But because of Jethro's intuition, he was not only able to see the present, but he was also able to see down the road. And we have to keep in mind that sometimes what works well now may not work so well down the road. That's what Jethro provided, was that perspective. Yes, it may work now, and even that's probably in dispute. But what's not in dispute is that if Moses didn't change, it would lead to disaster both for him and for the people. So great leaders then always keep the big picture in mind, so they don't get mired in all the nitty-gritty details. They're aware of that, and they have people to look after that, but they don't get down in the weeds themselves because they have the big picture in mind, not only where we've been, but where we are, where we're going. And so Jethro was able to see the end goal. And we mentioned it earlier, and that was that the people could go home in peace and that Moses could endure as a leader. Isn't it interesting that his proposal addressed both concerns? Next, intuitive leaders see clearly, which means they provide structure. So good leaders do more than motivate people to follow them. I've said before that the essence of leadership is anybody following? There's a Chinese proverb that says, "He that thinks he leadeth and hath no one following is only taking a walk." Well, I think there's some truth to that, but it goes beyond just people walking after you, because intuitive leaders, good leaders, also provide a structure that allows the leadership to flourish. So we don't want people just riding in our coattails. We want them to flourish. So Jethro created the structure that allowed the leaders of Israel to flourish. How did he do that? Because of his plan, in that he proposed leaders of thousands and hundreds and fifties and tens according to their abilities. So what was the result of that, or the impact of that? Well, think of it from the perspective of a gifted leader. Well, most likely they were put in a position where they oversaw the thousands or maybe the hundreds. Now, on the other hand, perhaps there were some newer leaders or maybe just less gifted leaders. Well, they were put in charge of the 50s and the 10s. And the benefit there is that they weren't set up to fail by being in over their heads. How critical it is to set people up to succeed. And in this whole lesson, we're talking about adding value to people and how intuition can do that. And one of the best ways that we can add value to people is by placing them in positions where they can succeed. We do that by matching their gifts with the role that we give them. So there you go. Okay. Number 4 then is that they see relationally. They provide support. And I'm really glad that this point is here, because sometimes the word leadership and management kind of get thrown around interchangeably, but I really don't think they ought to be, because really I look at it like this. You manage projects, you manage things, but you lead people. People don't want to be managed. They do want to be led. And so there's always a relational component to this. And intuitive leaders see that and make sure that there is support for those that they're leading. So smart leaders take into account the relationships of the people that they impact. Jethro wisely proposed a leadership structure that would provide mutual support between Moses and the leaders he would appoint. So look at it from Moses' standpoint. Well, now he's not going to bear this entire burden himself, because he's only going to be handling the most difficult cases. And from the leader standpoint, they're going to get the opportunity to exercise their leadership gifts, but at a level that's commensurate with their ability, as we just pointed out. So Moses avoids burning out. These new leaders get to try on their new leadership wings, if you will, and the people get to go home in peace because they know that they were heard. So really, we talked about it as if it's a win-win, but I think you could make a very compelling case that it's a triple win, not a double win, because the leaders also, they won too. So, 5th, and finally today, they see expectantly. Talking about intuitive leaders, they provide confidence. So a leader's intuition can build up his or her level of confidence because intuition brings a sense of accomplishment. When you have that sense that you know what to do, that you're not being wishy-washy about it, or that you're vacillating between several different options. It just gives you that sense that you know, that you know, that you know. And so that you can take action decisively, not in a very helter-skelter kind of way. And so that then obviously helps the leader to build confidence. And then what does it do with the people they lead? Would you rather follow a leader who didn't have confidence or a leader who does? Well, obviously, that's a rhetorical question. We would all want to follow a leader who inspires confidence in us and who builds our confidence. And so that's what intuition does. It builds up the leader's confidence, which then in turn will inspire confidence in those of the people. So Scripture records that Moses took Jethro's advice to heart and implemented this, shall we say, organizational plan. Now, at this point, it's interesting because what happens is Jethro leaves. He just leaves. Now, what's interesting there is two things. Number one, that he felt the freedom to leave. Okay, Moses, you got this. We hear that a lot these days, don't we? You got this. I think Jethro probably shared that with him long before that ever became a popular phrase. I'm sure Jethro looked at Moses and said, Moses, you got this. And then Moses felt the confidence that he could handle it. He got the input that he needed. He set the plan in place, but he didn't go begging Jethro, oh, please don't leave. Please don't leave. You got to stay. No, he now had the confidence that he could implement this plan and that it would work. And we know that it did. So by way of conclusion today, Jethro gained nothing from helping Moses become a leader in the tangible sense we're talking about. He wasn't rewarded. He didn't receive any property. He didn't get recognized in Leadership Huddle or get a WOW award. That's for all of us here at Adena. He didn't get written about in leadership or show up in the Monitor. His entire story, in fact, comprises one little chapter, 27 verses in the book of Exodus, chapter 18. But the insight he shared from his intuition was a gift. And that gift he gave freely. And what did it do? It added value to Moses. It ended up adding value to the leaders that became appointed. And it added value to the people because it conveyed that their needs mattered. Isn't that what all great leaders do? At the end of the day, they add value to people. And so, as we conclude our time today with, of course, our question for reflection, do you use your insight to add value to others? And I ask that because we could opt to use it in a more selfish way or to advance our own agenda or our own career. But I invite you to think with me today. Do you use your insight to add value to others? And maybe you could ask a second question. How do you, or how could you? How could we do this more? How could we use our insight to add value to others? In fact, I think I like that just a little bit better, to take it away from the yes, no, the forced choice option, but to maybe rephrase it just a bit and say, how can you? How do you, or how can you use your insight, your intuition, which itself is a gift, to add value to others? We thank you for being with us each and every day, whether you're there on Zoom or here in the chapel. Of course, those of you who are watching later on video, we're so excited and happy that you're with us. And we just pray God's blessing on you for the rest of the day, and pray and believe that not just this week, but every week's lessons are adding value to you, because that's the motivation for doing this. So We just pray God's blessing on you all, and we'll see you back here tomorrow at 3:30. God bless you.